Facile formulas, catchy slogans, 10-step programs, and quick fixes too often dominate today's management training programs. But in organizations, as in all of life, human behavior is seldom predictable, and business dilemmas do not easily lend themselves to gimmicks or simplistic answers. In Management of the Absurd, psychologist, educator, and former CEO Richard Farson presents a series of management paradoxes designed to challenge conventional wisdom and encourage managers to re-examine their assumptions about effective leadership. Good morning, this is Ron. It is November the 14th on Tuesday. Welcome to Storytime. Today, Chapter 29, the more experienced managers, the more experienced the managers, the more they trust simple intuition. The one quality that many top executives agree separates them from their less successful competitors is confidence in their intuition. Companies will pay highly for executives with a reputation for golden guts, whose immediate visceral reactions to people and events seem accurate, thus making their judgments more valuable. Most analysts would argue that what is attributed by these executives to intuition is more likely the accumulation of many learning experiences that have sensitized them, making them able to read situations quickly. But because the processes the leaders go through in exercising their judgments are mysterious to them, they attribute their powers to intuition. Notwithstanding this reasonable explanation, there is still much to be said for the ability to trust one's own immediate reactions. I was once appointed dean of a school of environmental design at a distinguished institution that housed all of the arts, an unusual appointment for a psychologist. Understandably, I felt quite amateurish when I sat in on the selection process, reviewing the portfolios of prospective students. I tried my best to apply what little understanding I had of form and composition, but it seemed to take forever. What always amazed me was how quickly the other deans and faculty members who sat in on these sessions could make their judgments. They seemed to know immediately which were the better portfolios. As time went by, I came to a startling realization. I, too, had known almost immediately which were the stronger works, but because I lacked confidence, I felt obliged to apply formal principles to the assessment process. I had been afraid to trust my own judgment, my own first reactions. I should have known this because the same phenomenon applies in psychotherapy. The most experienced therapists trust their immediate visceral reactions over complicated analytical thinking. A clear-eyed wisdom. We admire children for their quick and uninhibited judgments. To a great extent, we want to recover for ourselves the immediacy of childhood reactions. While the judgments of children may not actually be better than ours, we do nevertheless believe that they have a clear-eyed reaction to people and events, unfettered by the process of intellectualization. We attribute the same powers to animals, suggesting that Rover can always spot a bad person by the degree to which he avoids or warms up to that person. This can be seen very clearly in the ridiculous but nevertheless compelling formula for television programs such as Lassie, where the wife is always seen as wiser than the husband, the children wiser than the mother, and the animals wiser than the children. But as we get older and more experienced, we somehow lose touch with this primitive wisdom. Perhaps it is because much has happened to us as adults that has not yet happened to children, causing our judgment to be impaired. Perhaps we learn not to see. Anthropologist Margaret Mead told me once that children see events that we adults have not learned to notice. What this says is that experience is not always the best teacher. Sometimes it closes us down. We learn many things that blind us and lead us to mistakes in judgment. What gets in the way? How are we fooled? What happens that creates barriers to good judgment? Here are some of the probable answers. Both in high school and at home, we are taught a reliance on authority, on the opinion of others. We are taught not to trust our emotions, that our emotions are our enemies and will get us into trouble. As adults, we are often victimized by images. We learn to be impressed by resumes, by clothes, by appearances, and we tend to attribute powers and qualities to people that go well beyond reality. The ancient Greeks believed that if you were very beautiful on the outside, you were probably very beautiful on the inside as well. That virtue and beauty went hand in hand. As Gloria Steinem points out, we may have reversed that notion in modern culture if we believe that a beautiful woman probably isn't very bright. Both, of course, are stereotypes that blind us to the truth. We have selective perception when it comes to supporting our belief systems. We simply ignore things that don't fit and accept things that do. We tend to find what we are looking for. Scientists usually find what they have hypothesized. Politicians hear more clearly the concerns of those who share their convictions. Members of religious groups see their views as being more widely held than is actually the case, and those who believe in UFOs or angels are more likely to see them. Evidence to support one's beliefs is remarkably easy to find. We are influenced by what has worked before. We always want to repeat our successes, even if what we did before may not apply in the current situation. We have been taught to be suspicious of our initial reactions. We lack confidence in our first impressions because we are so often reminded of when we have made mistaken judgments that way. But actually, we learn a great deal about a person in the first few seconds of an encounter, and our first impressions are usually right. There is an oft-cited psychological experiment in which people are shown photographs of faces and asked to match them with the occupation from an accompanying list. Because the bank robber was more often identified as the bank president, this experiment is presented to show how wrong our first impressions can be. But if we look at all the judgments that were made of the faces, the people in the experiment tended to be correct more often than not. We have amazing abilities to assess other people. We are aware of how many times we have been embarrassingly wrong, but we don't even notice how many times we've been right. Since it is difficult to trust our intuition when we are insecure and afraid to take risks, we feel obliged at those times to make a rational, defensible justification for our judgments. This is in contrast to what parents often do when they answer a child's question by simply saying, "Because." "Why can't I?" "Because." "Why did you do that?" "Because." The word that seems to carry no meaning actually carries a great deal of meaning. It says, "My accumulated experience here has convinced me of something that I can't explain to you in rational terms, or that you cannot yet understand. I feel it deeply from head to toe, but cannot and will not take the time now to try to analyze it in terms that would do full justice to the power of the feeling I have." Too bad that an executive could never get away with answering, "Because." Children look at things we turn away from. They will point at a person who has no legs when we wish they would ignore that person, as we adults try to do. But better executives have this childlike quality, being able to wade into areas others avoid. Sometimes just pointing at what is going on is a valuable way to break through a barrier. We are sometimes overdependent on the judgments of others. We demonstrate what psychologist Irving Janis called groupthink, wanting to go along with the group. Some of the greatest leadership blunders of history have come about that way. Watergate is only one of the most recent. Many psychological experiments have shown how our perceptions can be shaped by group behavior. We actually see things differently when we are being pressured toward group consensus. Leader as litmus paper. For those reasons, much of the job of executive development is an unlearning process, getting rid of barriers to perception and wisdom and judgment. Leaders need to regain trust in gut reactions. To do that, we can think of ourselves as sensitive instruments, measuring situations and registering visceral reactions that are usually ignored but should be paid attention to. It's not unlike dipping litmus paper into a solution to get a reaction. Of course, we cannot lose sight of all the rational factors that make for good decisions. While we are paying attention to our gut reactions, at the same time we must be alert for objective information that might contradict those reactions. So it can be a bit of a dilemma to judge how much value to place on visceral reactions, and when one considers the various barriers described above, it is perhaps understandable that most managers err in the direction of dismissing what their guts are telling them. And that was chapter 29, and that leaders, good leaders, use their guts to make their decisions more often than not. Next time on Thursday, the 16th, is going to be Chapter 30. Leaders cannot be trained, but they can be educated. Now, again, that'll be on Thursday, November the 16th. And until then, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.